Okay, this is Alex from phpacademy.org and I'm creating this tutorial for the new Boston about functions, and this time we're going to be passing arguments to our function. I've already spoken about why functions are useful, but I'll recap. Functions are useful in code to shorten the amount of code you do have to write, and you can refer back to these functions, which is called calling a function, and it will process the same code every time you call. And we set up a function like this. We have function, we have the name of the function, we have a block of code, and the code goes in here, and we call the function simply by calling the function name. So this is the standard syntax that you would expect to find in a function. Now, what if I want to create a function that's going to add two numbers together? Now, this is a sort of real life example of why you might use a function. You may have a program that simply does add two numbers together. You might take user input, you might take number 1 and number 2, and you may need a function to add these two numbers together to save repeating this code. It's always good practice to use functions as well, because they structure your code a lot better than if you're doing things on the fly. By calling functions, especially with arguments, you're saving a lot of time and you're making it look a lot better, a lot easier to read as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get rid of this calling here, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to call this function add. Now, inside this function I need to specify which arguments I want to bring into the function to be able to use, and these are in the form of variables. So I want number 1, comma, number 2. So I'm feeding in two different numbers. Now, I haven't specified the variable type. I haven't specified if these are numbers or string. It doesn't actually matter. That depends on how you deal with everything inside your function here. So my function is going to add two numbers together. Now, what I want to do is I want to echo out this particular result. So I want to echo number 1. Now this is in reference to this. So the arguments up here must match when you reference them inside your function. So number 1 plus number 2, and then we've just echoed that out. So now if we call our function, first of all I'm going to show you, I'm going to call it without any arguments inside here, just to show you what happens. So let's refresh. Now you can see that we've got a warning come up, which is missing argument for 1, or missing argument 1 for add. So it's telling us the first argument is missing for this named function, and it tells us where it's been called, and it also tells us where our function has been declared. It's also missing an argument 2 for the same function, called in the same place and defined or declared in the same place, and then it's actually given us our result. So we obviously want to now include some numbers. So what I'm going to do is up here I'm going to say number, or I number 1 equals 10. I just for me stands for input, so, and I'm going to say I number 2 equals 5. So by the end of this, when we've created this, we should have the result of 15, because 10 add 5 is 15. So we're going to add these two numbers together. So when we call our function down here, we want to specify these two variables. Now these two variables will then be passed through. I number 1 will be passed through to number 1, and I number 2, I number 1 and I number 2 can be called absolutely anything. You could call it sort of num1, n1, anything you wanted, but I'm just using these so we can keep an eye on it. So I number 1, comma, I number 2. That's all the arguments that we need to pass. So these two variables here are going to be interpreted here, and then they're going to be processed here, and we're just echoing out the result of this. So now let's refresh and see what we get. We get the result of 15. So let's change these variables around a bit. We'll say 22 add 8, this should equal 30. So let's refresh and see if everything works. That's fine. Okay, so now what do we want to do if we're wanting to pass, let's say, a number and a string? So let's create another function. Let's delete everything and start again. I'm going to create a new function called display date. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to feed in the day, the date, and the year. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is echo day, and we want to append a space. Then we want to append date, append another space, and append year. So obviously our day here is going to be in string format because it will be either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way up to Sunday. Date is going to be an integer, and year is going to be an integer. So what do we need to do to be able to say, well, we need to read in a string and we need to read in two integers? Well, the answer is we need to do absolutely nothing. As with variables on their own, PHP is going to handle this for us. So now I'm going to call the function display date. I'm going to type in Monday 31 2011, just for an example, and now the result of this will be Monday 31 2011. So it's doing exactly what we've asked it to do, even if we combine variables. So that's functions with arguments being passed in PHP.